Hofstra ceramic students, welcome to my studio. For most of this semester, we'll be working on Blackboard and Zoom from my studio, and this is the new reality for the fall of 2020. Welcome, FA80 and FA82 students. Let's get started. That was a pretty dramatic opening, I know. So what I'd like to do before we start, I know you're curious from that, and I'd like to take you around the studio and we'll see what a professional studio looks like, and you'll see how lucky you are to have that fantastic studio at Hofstra that we built. So I'm going to walk up and walk around the studio and point some things out, and then we'll start our lesson plan right after that. So if we look around the studio, we can see there are all sorts of tools, chemicals, bins, potter's wheels under the tables, glazes, various kinds of jars, different kinds of potter's wheels, storage racks, slab roller, and then even a clay mixing room. Let's walk around and see. So similarly to the studio at Hofstra is a clay mixing room. This room has some of my clays laid out, so it's easy for me to grab them. A moving table, lift table, a mixer, Soldner mixer, just like the one you have at Hofstra. And then I would take the clay out, roll it out, and put it through my pug mill. Put it through here and pug out the pugs of clay. For my work, I put them in rolling bins and then I can roll them around the studio. If we go over here, we'll see there are some potter's wheels for the meanwhile. Now that I'm working on the tabletops, I have space under the table to store them. There are glazes here. And there are a couple of interesting potter's wheels on the other side. I'll show you. This is my slab roller. Try to get it out of the way, but still functional. And if we walk over here, we'll see, first of all, my Korean style kick wheel. So this is just made of wood. And the nice thing about it is that it's very light and goes both directions very easily. It's fantastic for trimming. And what I've done is I've built a catch underneath, so hours and hours of trimming can just fall into the catch and I can shovel them out later. The wheel I like to work on is this Randall wheel. I know you guys, some of you guys have tried the Randall wheels at the clay studio. It's just very comfortable to sit and work here. I've arranged the lights so that I have good lighting even at night when I'm working. My tools are all laid out, so all I have to do is grab them. I don't have to get up off the wheel to do anything. I have boards. I fill the board with pots. Take the filled board and put it right on the rack. These racks are adjustable so that I can put different shelves on there depending upon the size of the work. So here's a bunch of things I'm making for a little commission. They're screws that I threw on the potter's wheel. So let's come around, let's go into the showroom and take a look, see what we got there. One of the important things about working in a studio is that everything changes every 20 minutes. There are always new things to do. So one of the very important things is to have a shop built into the studio. So here's a metal wood shop with all kinds of devices, grinding devices, drills, all the tools laid out, chop saw, drill press, every kind of screw imaginable, all kinds of tools laid out because you never know what you're going to do. Sometimes you're building crates, Sometimes you're building a support for something. Sometimes you're making a tool, fixing a tool. So just yesterday I made a special tool to extrude a certain size coil so I could do the demonstration for you, because the coils I generally use for my work are much larger. Let's go into the showroom and I'll show you some of the finished work in the showroom. Let's pan this. This is one of the two showrooms in my studio. This showroom is for sculpture, and I have a second showroom for pottery. I find that I keep them separate because this is the sales part of your work. And generally speaking, it's not the same client who will buy pottery and the same client who will buy sculpture. So I found that by separating them, it makes my life a little bit easier. I don't have to move the pots out to show the sculpture. I don't have to move the sculpture out to show the pots. But you know that these things are heavy. So these sculptures are maybe 600 pounds. And what I've done, everything in this studio rolls. Everything rolls, everything has a system for moving it very easily, so I can work by myself. I don't have to hire wonderful 20-year-old students to come and help me all the time, which I would love, but it's a long distance from Hofstra University. So let's go on. We'll cut now. We'll go to the kiln room. So just like at Hofstra, I have two basic kinds of kilns here. I have a third one down the hill, a wood-burning kiln, but this is my electric kiln. It's similar to the one at Hofstra, just a little bit bigger and a little higher quality. When you have a student kiln, the students tend to pour glaze on the edges and chip it and have all kinds of problems, but professionals rarely do that. So this is one electric kiln. This is my gas kiln. The gas kiln has a much larger size than the one at Hofstra University. It's maybe 6 or 8 times the size of that kiln, maybe more. Because it's so heavy, you know, if you've ever pushed the cart in at the Hofstra kiln, you know that it weighs quite a bit. So what I've done is I've affixed a system here by which I can bring the cart in with a winch. This winch then disconnects, and I can hook it to a bracket on this wall and use the same winch to pull the cart out. So just because you're an artist doesn't mean you don't use all your skills. You know, you have to realize what are my problems, what are my potential problems here before you start a project, or before you start building a kiln, or before you start building a studio. Figure out what are my potential problems and see how you can work them out ahead of time. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but then you just keep adjusting, because the name of the game is to be successful at what you do and not work yourself to death. So let's go back to the studio and we'll start the project. You saw the sculpture showroom, and the pottery showroom is upstairs. So, welcome back to the studio. Good afternoon, beginning ceramic students. My name is Paul Shalev, Professor Shalev to you. I'm going to be your instructor this semester. I've been working with clay professionally for 53 years and teaching at Hofstra University for the last 23 years. I guess we're a little bit lucky because this will be my last semester at Hofstra University before I retire, so I get a chance to meet you all. I know it's through Zoom and the new reality is a little strange, but it is what it is, as politicians tend to say. But we'll have a good session, we'll have a good class, you'll learn a lot, I hope, and my goal is to get you inspired to really love this. So I know some students take ceramics class because they love art. Other students take ceramics class because it fit in. Some take it because they think it might not be that difficult. All three are true. So let's start in the beginning and see where we can go. I have to introduce you to the studio and to the system that we're going to be using for this semester. Because this class is online only, not in person, I can't insist that you attend the studio, the ceramic studio at Hofstra University in Calkins Hall. However, it's a fabulous studio. We have 4 really great young student aides who run the studio. And if you want to do your work from there and Zoom or whatever else we do from that space, that's perfectly fine. You'll learn a lot. If you have to do it or want to do it from your home or dorm or wherever you are, that's also fine. We can do that as well. I've arranged this course so that there's no equipment that you definitely need that exists in the studio and that you can't have at home. There are a couple of things we have to go through first. The most important thing about any kind of ceramics or ceramic studio is safety. So we have to make sure that you're going to be in a situation where everything is okay and you're not going to get hurt, neither will anybody else. There's a safety video on Blackboard for the art department, and you must look at it. It will register, if you log on to it, it'll register that you've logged on to it, and then I can check that and make sure that you've gone through that video. It's a school rule. If you're taking other art courses, you'll know that you'll have to do the same thing, the same video for those other courses. Secondly, common sense is your best protection. You see something that might feel odd, assume it is, and use your common sense. You see something that's spilled on the floor, don't step on it. Tell somebody. If you're in the studio and something spilled, some water or whatever, clean it up. Or if you're not in the position to clean it up, get somebody else to do it. Right away though, don't wait. If you see that somebody's doing something that you think is dangerous, tell them. They'll only help, it's only helpful, it's fine. There are also student aides who are in the studio when you're there, and you can tell those student aides if you feel awkward about telling a student to do something or not to do something. Another thing, don't use any equipment unless you've been instructed on how to use it. There is equipment in the studio, slab rollers, potter's wheels, extruders, and they're all for your use, but you have to be instructed on the proper method of using them before you start. With the extruder, there are certain dies that have to go in. With the slab roller, if you don't do it the right way, the slab roller will snap, will break. It seems strong, but it's a very fragile piece of equipment. And it takes weeks to get the repair parts done. So that means all of the students in all of the classes don't have the slab roller because you weren't smart enough to ask a student aide to show you how to do it. They're very good, these student aides. They will do whatever it is you need, and they're very well trained. Please respect the mask requirement. So I know you know that in all of your classes, but not only for you, but for everybody else around you. You may only be in the ceramic studio in Calkins when there's a student aide present or a professor present. There has to be somebody who is employed by Hofstra University in that studio for you to be allowed to work there. So even if there's free hours and it's posted free hours and the student aide has not shown up or the professor didn't show up for some reason, you may not be in that studio unless somebody comes in. You can stop up at the office and ask them if somebody called in sick or whether they're just late, but you may not go into the studio unless there's somebody hired by Hofstra University in that studio. Once the student aide leaves the Hofstra studio, you must leave. Even if you're just in the midst of your most creative moment, unfortunately, these are the rules that the university has set out and we have to follow them. You're going to need some tools. There's a set of clay tools, clay working tools that is available at the bookstore. Or if you go into the ceramic studio, the student aides there will give you free tools set for yourself for the whole semester. Since so many students leave the tools at the end of every semester, we save them and we give them to students the next semester. So you have a choice of buying the set of tools from the school store or getting the same tools free, used, but still in good shape, free from the ceramic studio. Ask one of the student aides when you're there. Wooden rolling pin you're going to need. So if you're not working in the studio, you're going to have to buy some type of wooden rolling pin. This is a very large one, but you can buy a wooden rolling pin on Amazon.com, on Walmart.com, Target.com. I think the Amazon.com is $9.95. And I'll list all that on Blackboard. You'll need a cloth, a piece of cloth. In the ceramic studio, there is some cloth, some canvas, but you'll need a sheet of cloth, something about this size, maybe 18 by 20 inches, so that you can roll out pieces of clay, you can put things on them, put your tools down, and that the clay won't stick to your tabletop, and it won't stick to the tabletops at the ceramic studio at Hofstra. You'll need some plastic bags. I suggest the large kitchen bags, maybe a box of 10 would be perfectly good, but you must have plastic bags to wrap your work. Clay, we'll talk about the material clay in a little bit, but clay dries, and once it dries, you cannot re-wet it. It won't turn wet again, it won't turn soft again. So you may have worked on a piece and you're not quite finished. You'll have to wrap that piece up in plastic, put it on a shelf, save it until you can come back and work on it again. That could be in your house or it could be at the ceramic studio. You'll need an atomizer. I use an old Windex bottle that I've cleaned out and squirts a little water. The clay dries out, you want to keep it damp. The best way is to spray it. And you'll need a metal fork. So, what did I do with my metal fork? Okay, just excuse me for a second. Okay, an old metal fork, 4-tine fork is perfectly good. It's going to be a very useful tool for you. The materials you're going to use, so those are the tools, the materials you're going to use is clay. So that's all we'll be working with. What is clay? Does anybody know what clay is? What does it look like? What does clay look like to you? So most often when I ask students this question, they say, it looks like earth, or it looks like dirt, or it looks like whatever. Play-Doh, you guys know Play-Doh. You know, when I was a child, we didn't have Play-Doh, and every student played with clay. You probably played with Play-Doh of some sort, some kind of plastic material like that. But what does clay look like? Eventually, one student will come out and say, it looks like mud. Yes, great answer. It looks like mud. If you were thinking that, 100. Why does it look like mud? It sort of is mud. but it's a very specialized kind of mud. It's a very organized kind of mud. Clay is a natural material that exists over the whole world. There's no continent that does not have clay on it. And there's also no continent that has human habitation where people haven't used clay extensively to better their lives. So clay is a type of earth, but it's a very organized kind of earth. If we think about the globe, the earth that we live on, it's formed of various materials, various minerals, various water, air. The solid minerals, the two most common solid minerals on the face of the earth are alumina and silica. They also happen to be elements. So they're the two most common solid elements on the face of the earth. They're not the two most common elements because I think nitrogen and oxygen might be more common. There may be more of that. But the two most common solid elements are silica and alumina. Clay is a mixture of silica and alumina, very natural materials that exist all over. But what happens is when the earth formed, you know, there's a hot core, there's a medium area, and there's an outer crust. On the outer crust of the earth, about 65% of it is formed of stone. And almost all of that is a stone called feldspar. Now you don't know feldspar because you don't commonly use it, but you have used it when it changes into granite. So granite is a type of feldspathic material that's been changed. So you've had granite countertops, or you've heard the term granite, or you've stepped on granite steps. When feldspar or granite decomposes by the use of water, when weather comes onto the feldspar over years, thousands and thousands of years, what happens is slightly acidic water unites with the feldspar. So a molecule of feldspar unites with a molecule of slightly acidic water over thousands of years, and the whole structure of the molecule changes and changes into clay. That's called a primary clay. That's the main clay that we have all over the world. Do we have any science students here? So I hope so. But the thing about clay then is that it forms a new molecule. This molecule, strangely, forms a very specific shape. It's extremely flat. It's only a couple of atoms thick, 3 atoms thick or 4 atoms thick, and extremely flat, like a disc. So it's like a platelet. Because it's so flat, you know that the molecule is formed of atoms. An atom is formed of a nucleus and an outer ring of electrons. Because this is so flat, the outer ring of electrons on the edges have a negative charge. The electrons have a negative charge. The center, the nucleus, has a neutral or positive charge, usually a positive charge. Positive charge, negative charge. This molecule then has a slight positive charge in its center and a slight negative charge around its edge. These negative charges and these positive charges start to attract each other. And the reason clay is very special is that it's plastic. What do we mean by plastic? Here's a piece of clay. How many other materials do you know can you do this with? And they'll stay. They don't spring back. It has great plasticity because these positive and negative charges are holding it together. This is the only material, natural material on Earth that does this, and it makes it a very special material. So this plastic material can change. Remember, the clay molecule was a stone molecule. We added slightly acidic water. It became clay. It became plastic from being not plastic. We can let it dry. The water will, any water in between the molecules will dissipate, will evaporate, and then we can put it in a fire and drive out the water that came into the clay molecule, and turn it back to stone. When we fire it, we call sintering, reach a certain temperature and fire it, we create a material called ceramic. So ceramic isn't clay. Ceramic is clay that's been fired. Clay is the material. Ceramic is the fired material. So this is a class in ceramics, in beginning ceramics. So it means we're going to make things out of clay, and we're going to learn to fire them. Let's continue on the syllabus. So you'll need a bag of clay. In the bookstore they sell clay in plastic bags. 25-pound bag of clay. Where am I going to keep 25 pounds? How am I going to carry 25 pounds? Well, you can carry 25 pounds. You can carry it to the clay studio, and every student can have a locker at the clay studio. Have the student aid give you a locker there, and you can keep all your tools and all your clay in there. I would keep everything that's dirty in there, not put your good clothing in there. The studio will have open hours. The studio will have posted open hours so that during your class time, I know there are some open hours, so you're welcome to be at the studio when we Zoom together or talk, or in your home. Either way works. But there'll be many other open hours. I'm not sure what the schedule is this semester yet, but they'll be posted in the studio. So stop by at the studio, take a look at the postings on the glass doors, on all of the outside doors of the studio, and it'll say there are open hours. That means any student who's taking a ceramics course has the right to be there. If it turns out there's too many students working there because of the COVID situation and the distancing, then we'll have to do something. But usually it works out that there aren't that many students working there. Okay. Okay, about running the classes. The first 2 sessions of this class will be run on film, on video. Because I have personal things I have to attend to in August, I won't be able to be with you the whole time on Zoom during these on the 24th and 26th. Starting on September 2nd, I intend to be with you, working on Zoom with you throughout the class time. If you notice, there are 3 advanced students in the class who are taking a different class at the same time. Now, these 3 students are actually, 2 of them have been my students for a number of years. One of them was my student for 1 semester. They're pretty good, and they're doing an interesting thing. They're doing ceramic sculpture. So keep an eye on them. Look and learn from them, learn from each other. I'm only 1 teacher. So 1 teacher for the whole class means I can only give you so much time. But you can learn from each other just as well as you can learn from me. And if somebody else has a great idea, look at it, judge it, steal it. Good artists borrow ideas. Great artists steal them and make them their own. Take the idea and change it into your own. So this course is going to be generally a course in creative participation. And what do we mean by creative participation? Well, participation, we know you have to do the work. And you'll be judged on the work that you do. What is creative, though? What is creative? That's the difficult thing to understand. So what forces do we employ to be creative? There are certain limits that we have. Our own personal experience, our own body. We can only do so much. We only know so much. One of the reasons you're in this class is to get to know more, to learn more, to open your eyes and learn new things, not to just take what you already know and implant it into the clay. So look at the other students, look at the more advanced students, look at the student aides who are working, and look at what I'm teaching you and listen to what I'm teaching you, and think of this as a learning experience, not a giving experience, but a taking. You have the right to take as much as you can during this class. This is a course in creative participation. What does this mean? What is creativity? What is participation? Participation is the easier one. You have to do the work. So if you work hard and you try, you'll do very well in this course. It doesn't matter if you are already a good artist or not. We're all starting from different places, and I understand that. You're going to have time to catch up. So let's say there's one student in this class who's worked with clay for 5 years, and another student who's never even looked at clay before. Eventually, all of the students will catch up with each other because it is the creative part of it that's important. We are in an art department in a liberal arts university. That means we're going to be looking at clay as a means to make art, not a means to make products. So there's a very big difference between utilitarian products and art. Now, we might make utilitarian products as part of our learning, but they're going to have to be, that we're going to have to try to understand how to make them important, have ideas within them, and make them beautiful. The utilitarian products that we're used to, that you're used to seeing in clay, are the tiles in your bathroom, the toilet, the sink, the plates that you eat off of, all of that. All of those materials are made to be perfect, not beautiful, not necessarily beautiful, not necessarily that functional, but easy to make and have a sense of visual perfection so that people can sell them. There's no correlation between perfection and beauty. You may make something in this class that is just totally imperfect. It's crooked, and it's falling, and it has finger marks, and it's not cleaned up. But it has so much soul, has so much energy in it, that it is really beautiful. I had a blind student one semester who was just fantastic. She couldn't perfect anything. She was totally blind. But every time she touched something, it had so much movement in it, it had so much energy in it, that she made the most beautiful work, most powerful work in the class. The other students were just amazed by her. So this is something you'll be able to do, and we'll talk about what creativity is. Creativity probably has something to do with the use of metaphor. How many students know what metaphor is? Okay, you all do. Great. Human beings, as far as we know, are the only animal that can use metaphor. Every other animal has other qualities, and many animals have qualities that we don't have. Dolphins have an echolocation device, and they can send out sounds and back, and so can bats. And they have special organs that will allow them to hear that. In the dolphin, it's called a melon. Sharks have a device that sends out electric charges, and they can feel what the electric charges of the fish swimming in front of them are, so they know who to attack. Platypus has the same thing, these electrolocators. Birds have a little bit of iron in their beaks, and they have magnetic locators, so they know where they are and how to get back home. You've heard of homing pigeons. Other animals have this too. Salamanders, various other animals have that. Human beings have the potential to use metaphor. There are other animals that can use logic, as we do, but no other animal that can use metaphor. A few other animals are able to use logic. So what would logic be for an animal? Let's say an animal is a hunter. It's a lion and it's chasing a deer, and the deer runs around the edge of a hill, and the lion doesn't see the deer anymore, and the lion stops. The lion has no idea that the deer ran around the edge of the hill and it can't see it. All it knows is that the deer is out of its vision. It doesn't have that kind of advanced logic that we have. So we know, oh, if it's not there, it probably made that turn. How did we develop metaphor? Well, that we don't really know. We probably developed metaphor very slowly from the time we were simians up until the time we were Homo sapiens. But how do Homo sapiens use that metaphor? That's what's important, and this is what's going to be important for you. So I always have had a theory that clay is the primal material out of which people made art. So here's clay. Why do I think it's the first material people used to make art? People say, oh, cave drawings, stone. They made things out of stone, wood, straw. Well, when Homo sapiens first developed, they lived mostly on the banks of rivers. So we're talking about 70, 80,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, Homo sapiens developed, they live on the banks of rivers. 98% of the clay in the world lines the banks of rivers. The Homo sapien takes its child, puts the child down while it tries to catch a fish, or hunts an animal, or gets some water, and the child picks up 2 pieces of earth, which is clay from the ground, takes these 2 pieces and does that, and imagines, play, imagine. This is mommy and daddy, this is uncle and father, this is those 2 people fighting or joining, or it looks like. So our ability to imagine, our ability to play, is the reason we're able to use metaphor. There are other animals that play, but they don't play in the same way we do. They don't say, I imagine this as a person. I imagine that as an animal. And how do I know that we used metaphor that early? Well, I know that people made things out of clay at least 30,000 years ago. That's 30,000 years. So that brings us into the Paleolithic, late Paleolithic age. And we even have fired pieces. People made kilns and were able to fire their work. The oldest piece we have is 27,000 years old. It's a figure of a woman, and it's fired clay, and where we found it, there are 10,000 broken pieces of clay that have been fired. And because of these broken pieces, we found out that clay, because it's so plastic, has shown us that people knew things we didn't know they knew. You press clay down, it picks up the texture. If you press clay into something, it naturally picks up the texture. So what we found in this digging in Pavlov in the Czech Republic, where we found the very oldest piece of clay, is that people were already weaving. We found woven material, and it predated weaving by 10,000 years. All of a sudden we found people were weaving 10,000 years before we thought they were. And because people sat on the clay, we found out what kind of footwear they had. And because children touch the clay, and we have very advanced methods of photography right now, we could find their fingerprints. And we could measure the distance between the ferrules of the fingerprint and find out that it was children touching it, or it was older people touching it. So we know who touched the clay. We know what they did with the clay, and we know what they made with the clay. So from 27,000 BC until about 12,000 BC or 13,000 BC, people only made art with clay. No utilitarian objects. Not a cup, not a bowl. The first thing people made with clay was art. After people started developing farming, they started to learn to make utilitarian ware. So I mentioned that people started firing clay about 27,000 years ago. Somewhere around 15 or 16,000 years ago was 27,000 years ago, you have to understand, was the Ice Age. People were living on ice. This group that we found in the Czech Republic were living at the edge of the glacier that came from the North Pole all the way through Europe and ended in what's now the Czech Republic. There was a little village there. About 60 to 80 people lived there, and one person made things out of clay. A phenomenal story, and I'll get into it in more detail in the next session. But during the Ice Age, we had to survive. And how did we survive? And why did human beings survive and some other groups not survive? And one of the reasons is we learned to cook. And in order to cook, In some areas, we could cook by taking hot stones and putting meat on the hot stone. In other areas, they didn't always have meat. They had vegetable, and they couldn't just put it on a hot stone. They needed something to cook it in. People learned to make utilitarian objects. Somewhere around 15,000 years ago they started, but by about 13,000 years ago it was pretty common to make very simple objects to put water and foodstuffs in to cook. Why is cooking so important to survival? Because during the maximal part of the Ice Age, the coldest part of the Ice Age, people needed to conserve their energy. If you look at animals that eat raw food rather than cooked food, they're usually huge and they graze all day long. Look at gorillas, look at other simians, chimpanzees. These are animals that have to eat all day long because they have to learn, the body needs time to digest all of these plant foods or meat foods, some of them, that they eat. When you cook, you pre-digest the food in the pot so that your body can use a lot less energy getting all the nutrients. And that's one of the reasons people survived in the Ice Age. Okay, so I talked about creativity a little bit. I talked about metaphor a little bit. And then we have certain limits. Each of us has certain limits. I only see the world a certain way. I see this as brown, and you may see this as gray-brown. I see this as cylindrical, and you may see the end of it, when you look that way, as round. I see this one way, you may see it another. I see this table as trapezoidal, but you may know that it's rectangular, and you may see it that way. All of us have limits in the way we see. One of the reasons we're in this class is to broaden our knowledge and broaden our limits so that we have less limits, and we're able to learn by trying things. And trying things entails something none of us like, and that's failure. You're going to make many pieces in this class, and some of them are going to be failures. And the only way to learn is to go too far and to make a failure and then get yourself back up and learn from it, and learn that, well, that was a failure because I made the side too thin, or I made that too round, or the clay was too wet, or I forgot to cover it over the weekend when I went away, or I didn't do this, or I didn't do that. But that's how you learn what to do. What that means also is that I'm going to give you time to do that learning and time to make those failures. So I'm not going to grade your very first pieces. So your first project and a half is not going to be graded unless you want me to. I'm going to start grading as you're into your second project, so that we can then understand that you've had time, everybody's had time to catch up with each other. The second limitation is not our limitation, but the limits of the material. What can this material do, and what can it not do? So this is not cloth. You can't sew it. It's not metal. You can't stretch it into a very long, narrow thing and bend it and have it stay there, because when it dries, it'll be brittle and come apart. So we're talking about the limitations of the material. Clay has certain limitations. You can only do this and you can only do that, and you can't go any more. So this is what we're going to learn in the class. You're going to have ideas and you'll say, oh, I'd love to make that. And you try and you find out that it's a little more difficult than you thought, or your idea was so placid, it was so safe that you could make it easily. I don't want you to be in that safe place. I want you to be in a slightly risky place. Not a total risk, not a place where you don't understand the materials at all, but a place where you're taking a slight risk to see if you can push the limits of this material and the limits of your learning. That would be a good student. That would be an A student to me. I've had A students who've come out with not one successful project. That means they tried so hard, tried new things so many times, that the project eventually fell apart. But their genius was that they tried interesting, intricate kinds of ideas, and they were idea-oriented. So that's the most important thing to me,
It may not be successful for you because you may want to come home with these objects that you can give mom or keep for yourself or go on to something else. But our goal here is learning, not producing. Here's where we come to the important part of the first project. The first project I'm going to assign to you is to make 10 small objects, to make them hollow. Each object should define a 3D sculptural form. So let's have some questions here. What's the first question? I'll have to imagine. Professor, what's small? Well, what's small to you is what's small. Professor, what's 3D? Well, it means nothing is going to be flat. Nothing is going to be on one plane. You're going to build a form of some sort. Why are you doing that? This is a three-dimensional class. And the reason I'm going to push three-dimensionality is because I know all of you have learned about art forms by looking online, on a screen, in a photograph, on a piece of paper, but very few of you have worked with three-dimensional concepts. So I want you to be able to learn that. It's very different than working online. When you think about three-dimensional online, you very often take a form and then it turns, but it's still flat. It turns and it shows you, all of the parameters of this piece as if it were three-dimensional. But you can't feel the weight. You can't feel the balance that this side is a little heavier than that side. You can't feel the sense that the bottom is a little thicker than the top. And this is the kind of thing we're going to learn by working with ceramics. So what are 10 small pieces? I'm going to teach you the techniques of building, of how to build clay, and then we'll get into the 10 small pieces. There'll be, in this class, there'll be 4 assigned projects during the semester. Each one will take a couple of weeks, sometimes more. There'll be 3 papers. Oh no, I've got to write papers for ceramics? What, are you kidding? The first paper is going to be pretty easy. The first paper has no grade, and it's 2 paragraphs defining yourself as an artist. What do you mean as an artist? Well, who are you? What makes you individual? What about your culture? What about your person? What about your personality? What are your quirks? What are your idiosyncrasies? How do you define the space that you live in? How do you define the space you would like to live in? So I'd just like 2 short paragraphs on September 2nd, due on September 2nd, where you define who you are. And you'll be talking to the whole class about this. You'll be reading this on Zoom to me, and the whole class will be part of it. So we can all discuss how we can individually approach each piece of clay so that we're not all making the same projects. Right now there are 7 or 8 students in the class. I want 7 different solutions to each problem. That would be a successful teaching gig for me, to have you all work differently. Second paper, I'm going to assign on the 26th, I'm going to assign a group of artists that I want you to look at. These are all artists who work in clay, and you're going to write a very simple paper. You can even do it on Wikipedia. What? I can write my paper on Wikipedia? And I don't have to say I didn't do that? Yes, you can. I'm going to have you look up a group of artists. You're going to write about their background, their story, whatever it said on your research, about why they make what they make, so that we'll understand that there are many different ways of approaching clay. Every one of these artists will have worked in clay, but everyone has a totally different approach. And some of them are from the Renaissance, and some of them are contemporary, and some of them are modern, which means a little before contemporary. And we'll learn that we can approach the clay from our own particular point of view. that paper will only be worth 5% of your grade. The first paper, 2 paragraphs about yourself, is called class participation. The second paper will be a term paper, will be a research paper, and I'll assign the topic later in the semester. I deliberately don't want to assign the topic right now because I don't want you to do this paper early. I want you to do it after you know all the techniques of building with clay and after you've had some sense of history of clay, so that you can do a research paper that has more depth and more understanding than you do right now. The last part of your grade will be class participation. It'll be 10% of your grade. Oh, the research paper will be 20% of your grade. The artist paper, 5% of your grade. The class participation will be 10% of your grade. And I may do a pop-up quiz because I'm going to do lectures. And I may give you a pop-up quiz during the Zoom period. And we may do that verbally. The 4 projects, the first project will be 10% of your grade. The second assignment, 15% of your grade. The third assignment, 20%. The fourth assignment, 20%. All those together add up to 100%. This will be posted on Blackboard. Do not worry. You don't have to remember everything that I've said, but this will all be posted on Blackboard so you'll understand it perfectly. There'll be a 5th optional project. If you're working at least a B level during the semester, that means you've done all of the projects so far. By 2/3 through the semester, you've done all of the projects, you've done them pretty well, you've written all the papers that were due, you've been at almost all the Zoom meetings. If you've done that, I'll give you the option of having a 5th project. It'll be a self-motivated project, one that you choose to do. You can do it either at home, from home, or in the clay studio. And you'll have the opportunity then to raise your grade by 1/2 grade. So let's say you're working at a B+ level. You can raise from B+ to A-. If you're working at an A- level, you can get raised from A- to A. If you're working at a B level, from B to B+, et cetera, et cetera. You must be working at least a B level to be able to do this, because I don't want to burden the students who are not working at that level with an extra project to do. Some of you are thinking about going to medical school. Some of you are thinking about going to law school. So it's basically, I try to do this basically for those students who absolutely need that high grade to get onto the next level of graduate school. For most students, it really doesn't matter. So that will be a 5th optional project. All of that will be online on Blackboard. You'll be able to see that. There are 2 major issues that I'd like to discuss towards the end of this discussion. One, I've had a lot of experience over many years, 53 years working professionally. So I started working professionally when I was a young man. I'm an old man now. And I didn't start teaching until I was 30 years a professional in the field. So I had a lot of experience before I even started teaching. There are 2 issues for working in art and clay that are very, very important. And they're very important for me to impart to you as a student. Issue number 1 is there is no correlation between perfection and beauty. How many perfectionists do we have in the class? Raise your hand. Good. That's fine. I'm not saying perfectionism is bad. I'm just saying that perfectionism doesn't always lead to beauty. We can create ceramic objects that have a lot of heart in them and they have no perfection whatsoever. Or we could create objects that are almost perfect and have no soul, that look dead because they have no ideas in them. Or we can create something with a lot of perfection and a lot of soul. We have every option in the world. I'm not saying one is better than the other or one is worse than the other. Just that I have to tell you and I have to emphasize there is no correlation between perfection and beauty. You're going to hear this ad nauseum all through the semester. I'm going to say it over and over and over again, even as I'm teaching you to perfect your work. The second important aspect of this is, how does a student find their particular voice with clay? What do you mean, my voice? Your point of view. How do we help you think like an artist? An artist has a particular point of view, a particular way of looking at the world. And you can always say, oh, that's a Picasso. Oh, that's a Raphael. Everybody can understand that point of view. How do we find your point of view? How do we help you find your point of view? I'm not the one to find it. You're going to have to find it. But I will help you in searching for that, so that you can have a particular way of working that's within a comfort level that's good for you. Experimentation, risk of failure, creating objects of art rather than manufacturing them, having an ultimate success by taking a slight risk and having a beautiful, meaningful piece rather than a safe piece is going to be important. So students are encouraged to take artistic risks, attempt work that exhibits some level of sophistication, and certainly not try to do that safe, hackneyed, common work. I'm not going to be impressed because you made a perfect teapot. I am going to be impressed because you made a teapot that has some sense of understanding of who you are and how the world is functioning. So for next class, August 26th, I want you to view the safety video on Blackboard. Number 1. I want you to buy your 25 pounds of clay and get it into your locker. Number 2. I want you to get all your ceramic tools, either from the bookstore, new ones in the plastic case that probably fills up the landfill, or used ones from the ceramic studio for free. You know which ones I prefer. I want you to get a piece of cloth about 12 by 18 inches. I want you to buy a box of 10 large kitchen-sized garbage bags. I want you to order a rolling pin. It's the classic rolling pin on Amazon. On Amazon, it's 17.5 inches by 2.5 inches. It's $9.99. Walmart.com, it's $13.95. Make your choice. I want you to, by September 2nd, second session, I want you to write 2 short paragraphs concerning how you might define yourself as an artist. Again, who are you? What makes you an individual? Your culture, your person, your personalities, your quirks, your idiosyncrasies, your particular way of defining the society or the space you live in. The clay, the rolling pin, the plastic bags, you'll have to have all that ready on September 2nd. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'll speak with you, or we'll talk with you on the 26th. So long. So that ends our session for today. Thank you so much for visiting me in my studio. I look forward to seeing you very soon, either on film or on Zoom. We'll see you then.
The gray, quiet horse wears the reins of dawn. No